Legitimate theater has been around for a long, long time. Now, finally, we have legitimate film. A brave, bold, new venture. A national theater on film. Theater masterpieces into masterpiece films. Broadway to Main Street. Great theater that now will find the audience it deserves.
Good evening. Thus, Sir Laurence Olivier, or the Lord as he's known down at the Old Vic, hustling television audiences in the United States on behalf of the American Film Theatre. And tonight the American Film Theatre is what we're going to look at. It's a sort of cottage industry, established and run by Eli Landau, movie producer and entrepreneur. It's a concept that's both ingenious and simple. Mr. Landau acquired a number of classic plays, the kind that everyone admires but very few people actually get to see, and using the best available actors and directors, put them on film for showing throughout America on a repertory basis. The second season of filmed plays is now in production, some of them being made here in England. And later in the programme we'll be seeing and talking to Joseph Losey and Topol, who are filming Brecht's Galileo, and Alan Bates and Lindsay Anderson, who are tackling David's stories in Celebration. But before we visit Elstree Studios, let's rejoin Lord Olivier in that promotional film made for American TV.
I'm standing on the balcony outside my home in London. I always think of this view as a backdrop. In the dim distance over there, about a mile beyond Big Ben, stands our brand new National Theatre. Not open yet. There's something wonderful to me about being on the stage or in front of a camera. The first time I knew the feeling was at the age of 9, playing, a little unbelievably perhaps, the part of Brutus in Julius Caesar. Since that time, nothing else has meant as much to me, or been able to replace the excitement of a curtain rising or of a director calling action. Each time, it's a new experience. Wonderful reawakening, the pleasure I get out of performing, of being part of that world. I'm sure this holds good for almost all people in the world of entertainment, particularly to appear in something of value, to work with the marvelous words of an O'Neill, a Pinter, a Chekhov, and Albee or Ionesco, in front of an audience on Broadway or in London. It's been difficult for most people to get to see much of the best live drama and comedy. Only a fortunate few in the great theater centers could see Zero Mostel in his Broadway role of Rhinoceros, or Alan Bates in Buckley, or witness the London cast playing out Harold Pinter's The Homecoming, or my own version of Three Sisters. But now, something is being done about that. Motion pictures of the works of great playwrights will be shown in theaters where the audiences are. Zero Mostel actually recreating his role in Rhinoceros.
I'm full of beans.
Sir Laurence Olivier with a word from his sponsor. And at this point, let's have a longer sample of the work of the American Film Theatre. One of the company's first productions was The Homecoming, a baffling but always fascinating sketch of family life by the enigmatic Harold Pinter. The play was first presented by the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1965 under the direction of Peter Hall, and Hall and virtually the original stage cast filmed Pinter's own screen version last year. Here's the scene when the homecoming son turns up for breakfast to the mild astonishment of his father.
Hello? Dad? We overslept. What's for breakfast? We overslept.
Did you know he was here?
No.
Did you know he was here? I asked you if you knew he was here.
No.
And who knew? Who knew? I didn't know.
I was going to come down, Dad. I was going to be here when you came down. How are you? Look, I'd like you to meet...
How long have you been in this house?
All night.
All night? I'm a laughing stock. How'd you get in?
I had my key.
Who's this?
I was just going to introduce you.
Who asked you to bring tarts in here?
Tarts?
Who asked you to bring dirty tarts into this house?
Listen, don't be silly.
You been here all night?
Yes, we arrived from Venice.
We've had a smelly scrubber in my house all night. We've had a stinking, pox-ridden slut in my house all night.
Stop it. What are you talking about?
I haven't seen the bitch for 9 years. He comes home without a word. He brings a filthy scrubber off the street. He shacks up in my house.
She's my wife. We're married.
I've never had a whore under this roof before. Ever since your mother died, my word of honor. Have you ever had a whore here? Has Lenny ever had a whore here? They come back from America, they bring the slop bucket with them. They bring the bedpan with them. Take that disease away from me. Get her away from me.
She's my wife.
Chuck him out. A doctor of philosophy. Sam, you want to meet a doctor of philosophy? I said chuck him out. What's the matter, you deaf?
You're an old man. He's an old man.
The way the American film theatre works is like this. Last year, 8 films were given matinee and evening performances for 2 days a week over a period of 8 months in 516 cinemas in the United States. The box office wasn't exactly left to chance. Tickets were sold on a subscription basis and had something close to £2 million in advance sales before the first film was shown. By the time the season was over, the final take was in the region of £7 million. Well, now the second season approaches, and this time the growth should be even bigger because about 650 American cinemas are taking part. The performances are on Mondays and Tuesdays because Mr. Landau, old Trudy that he is, figured that these were the days when cinema attendances were invariably at their lowest and when the movie-going audience needed a shot in the arm or some other part of its anatomy to reawaken its jaded appetite and jolt it out of its lethargy and its armchair. Eli Landau was in London last week discussing the possibility of distributing his pictures over here.
Well, we won't go the subscription route that we did in the United States. We hope to open here before the end of the year, and we will put all of the pictures out in kind of a repertory style. One picture will follow the other. Each picture will play as long as people will come to see it. I think that Eugene O'Neill is unique. I don't think he's ever been transferred to the screen as well as John Frankenheimer did it in our version of The Iceman Cometh.
My jolly old pal, and another little drink won't do us any harm. Do your duty, Brother Rocky. Bring on the rat poison. How goes it, Governor? Good to see you. Hello, Mac. Welcome, boyo. Willie. Hi, Scott. Hello, George. General what, John?
I believe that if you are not afraid of the spoken word, that you can add a cinematic technique and a production value to it that will hold and entrance audiences of the motion picture genre. Osborne's Luther had a very good run on the stage with Albert Finney. We used Stacy Keach, who gives a remarkable performance in it. We let the dialogue and the words of the author really give it the epic quality that Osborne did so well.
What I ask, by the mercy of God, is let someone expose my errors in the light of the Gospels. The moment this has been done, I shall ask you to let me be the first to pick up my books and hurl them in the fire.
On the other hand, when we did A Rhinoceros, we took Ionesco's play and we did update it, we did open it up slightly, and we made it, I think, a more accessible piece for people rather than an obtuse motion picture. I think it's a very motion picture that's going to hit a major mass audience as compared to some of the other properties that we did.
John, you wouldn't by any chance like to become a rhinoceros, would you?
I'm not a victim of prejudice like you are. Time for a change!
The audiences that we seek out are people who are looking to be intellectually provoked and entertained, and that's what the American film theater is basically all about. In Celebration is a very good example. It just opened for the first time in the United States. That's the play we're currently rehearsing right behind you or setting up for right now. It opened to rave reviews. It has been compared to some of the major classics of the American theater, such as Long Day's Journey into Night.
Education, lad, you can't do without. Look at your mother. Left school when she was 16. 16? I grew up with nearly retiring age in them days. She's still got her certificate upstairs.
I remember.
Proficiency in domestic science, nature study, and the English language, all done out in copperplate. Miss Helen Swanson. Her father were a big breeder just out of town.
It's interesting, actually, that when we did this play originally at the Royal Court, it was proposed to us, to David Storey and myself, that we should do a film of it. Actually, it was going to in the studio. But we both thought about it, and we thought this is not a film, it's a play. And the usual kind of changing and opening out would only spoil it. So we decided not to do it.
I mean, remember, we've got to walk down that street with you in public. Now, I don't mind walking with a woman.
Oh, then there's no need for you to be ashamed.
Ashamed? I'll never be ashamed, love. Whatever you wear, my darling, I never have been and I never will be ashamed.
Oh, in that case, we'll be all right.
Cut it. But this idea, I think, is an extremely good one, because you're not pretending that it's anything that it isn't. We're not pretending this is a movie. You are seeing a filmed version of a play, which I hope will have the advantages of both theatre in terms of acting, in terms of your cast, and the advantages of cinema in that we are really using the camera. But of course, to have a play set almost entirely in a living room of a miner's house, which is rather small, anything from 2 to 3 to 6 characters, presents quite a problem technically. And there are plays of David's, like The Changing Room or The Contractor or The Farm, which would, in a sense, be easier from a film point of view. But then this is a challenge.
Can we just do that now? Hey, we got in there then. Hey?
Where are you then? What's going on?
Oh! Hey! On the lav then, were you?
Oh, I was not.
Oh, fine girl, there's a lot been put on around here.
Oh, go on, get on, get on.
Come on then.
Right. She runs out excitedly, and we really sort of go in with her. Yes. And it's a play I'm very fond of, and actors, I think, are... It's a beautiful cast. We're doing it with exactly the actors we did it in the theatre 5 years ago. It's always a pleasure to work with Alan Bates, and that's why I'm doing it.
It's a sort of terrific sense of something probably having lain in one's subconscious, and then when you come to relive it again and re-find it, you're twice as keenly aware of it and of what it's about, and of its light and shade, and of its meaning, and of its emphasis. I find it terrifically fulfilling to play something after having played it and then left it, and to re-find it, actually. Butley is a sort of unique part. I think it's one of those parts in a lifetime, in a way, for an actor.
Oh. Oh, it's laid out like a film script. Must be an American MA thesis. Henry James and the Crucified Consciousness. Yeah. Oh, now where's the other? There must be a pair.
You mean you forgot to give his thesis back?
No, not yet. So far, I've forgotten to read it. Forgetting to give it back comes later. Failing Americans is a slow and intricate ritual, and that's what they come here for, the ritual. Ah, here it is.
Butley is a man who is sort of totally disillusioned and sort of bent on some kind of personal self-destruction.
I was just wondering when my tutorials are.
Oh, same as last term, except, of course, for this week.
You didn't take me last term. My name is Heasman, Carol Heasman. I'm replacing Mrs. Granger.
Mrs. Granger?
Yes. She said she didn't get to see you often owing to administrative tangles.
Mrs. Granger got into administrative tangles?
No. You were busy with them.
Oh, only they'd let us get on with it and teach.
What would you next, if you had the choice, like to do, say, for the American Film Theatre, then?
Well, now you're talking. I mean, now you're asking. I think I'd like to do, as an actor, I think I'd like to do a classic. Maybe it's a way to direct, if they'd let me.
I'm all yours. And so now to Joseph Losey and Galileo, which finished shooting at Elstree Studios last month. The films are all made on a fairly tight schedule of 6 weeks and an equally tight budget of around £350,000. But leaving aside the economic aspects and getting on to the artistic matters, here is Joe Losey talking about his particular interest in this particular play.
As you wish.
Fine. Well, shall we just go straight ahead, then?
Let's go straight ahead.
How long have you been working on this project, Film Galileo?
Well, I made the film, I made the theatre production of it first in 1947 in Hollywood with Brecht and Lawton. Directed it at a theatre called the Coronet. And later, after Brecht had left, after his appearance at the House Un-American Activities Committee, he would have been so delighted with what's going on with Nixon. After he left that day, Lawton and I did it in New York the same year. Then in '61, I very nearly got a Hollywood production, but the Vatican blocked it. And then, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, Paramount managed to buy it and put about $100,000 into the rights and 2 or 3 scripts. Hired, or I should say employed, no, hired, I think is more apt in this case, 2 or 3 directors, none of whom shot a foot of film. I've read several of the scripts, they're pretty bad. They also employed a number of actors, none of whom played in it, one of whom asked me to do it. And finally it reverted to the estate, and Mr. Landau had the foresight, the imagination to buy it for me. So here we are. Well, in the first place, we're shooting on a theatrical composite set. I'm beginning with title backgrounds from somewhere up in the flies of all kinds of activity that goes on in the theater. The scene that I'm shooting today, partly out of, well, largely out of necessity, is highly theatrical. There's no scenery at all. It's all projected on a triple M backing, which magnifies the image. It will be a very, very strange and very abstract effect. I also have certain scenes in which Topol speaks directly into the lens to the audience like that, to emphasize what Brecht called his asides, which were intended as a direct statement to the audience. Brecht's Galileo is a man of appetites. He says about him he liked eating, drinking, and thinking more than any man I ever knew. He also says, when I find out something, when I learn about something, I can't contain it. I have to tell someone like a drunkard or a lover. And the Pope says about him, even his thinking was sensual. He loved thinking bouts. Now, I think that Topol is a man of enormous vigor, much bigger than life size. Sometimes it's called ham, but when it's genius, it's still ham, but it's genius. And I think that's the case with him.
Well, I don't think that, I mean, we are definitely shooting a film, and techniques, I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's probably boring you, but the techniques are absolutely different in a film. I mean, we can talk very quietly because we know that the microphone is here and we don't have to aim to the last row in the theater. So when we want to whisper, we can really whisper to the microphone, and we can, we know that the camera is here, so we can move only our eyebrow, and we know that it has an effect, while in the theater you have to play with the whole silhouette of your body and whatever you can do. So we have the advantages of making a film. The material itself is of obviously it was written for the theater, though we have a screenplay, but it's not a naturalistic film. I mean, it's not De Sica's The Bicycle Thieves or anything like that. I mean, if you look at the sets, you see that they are not naturalistic sets. I mean, I don't want to spoil your illusion, but if you scratch these heavy stones, you'll see that it's made out of plastic, and we all know it, and it's deliberately, I think, made in a way that we don't want to tell you that this is real Venice, because if we wanted, we would have gone to Venice. I think it absolutely suits the ideas of Brecht about the play.
Costume, wardrobe.
Can we have the great coat?
So the mountain turned to water. I can't look at him. Tell him to go away! Steady. He saved his big gut!
Get him a drink.
I can walk. Just help me a little. Unhappy is the land that has no heroes.
Incorrect. Unhappy is the land that needs a hero.
It seemed to me to be extremely timely, both in relation to the witch hunt in the United States, and particularly in relation to atomic fission, the dropping of the atomic bomb, the danger of a hydrogen war, Watergate, and the general horror and corruption that's going on in America.
So you really see Galileo as a kind of saga for 20th century?
I think it's a morality play for Americans, written by a German. Brecht was never very accurate, I believe, about his historical facts. He didn't care greatly about that. But he's dealing with the responsibility of the scientist to the material which he's working with. And he says that if you separate science from humanity, that what could be a cheer could easily turn into a universal howl of horror. All of these quotations you can find exactly at one place or another in the book. He also deals very deeply and is deeply concerned with whether it is more necessary to be responsible socially or more necessary to preserve yourself in order to write the book or do the one piece of work that only one person could do. It is my belief that he eventually, in the course of his life, he changed his mind several times, but I think that by the time he ended, he came to the conclusion that there was no such thing as a book that only one person could write. In fact, that is one of the lines of the play, and that he was a traitor. He says, in effect, a man who has done what I have done should not be tolerated in the ranks of science.
Can we cut ourselves off from the people and still remain scientists? The battle to measure the heavens is won by doubt, by credulity, the Roman housewife's battle for milk will be lost again and again. Scienceality is involved in both struggles. What are you scientists working for? The sole aim of science, to my mind, is to lighten the toil of a human existence. If you give way to coercion, your progress must be a progress away from humanity. The gulf between you and humanity might grow so wide that the response to your exaltation at some new achievement could be a universal howl of horror.
I think there's less and less difference between film and theater than most people think or has been conventionally thought. And I think that Brecht is ideal from this point of view because he is both theater and film, and he's used film in theater and vice versa. He's never been able to make his work in films particularly well, partly because of the people he worked with, and partly because nobody's ever developed a style for him. But I think that we perhaps have succeeded on this. But he would be delighted with the whole idea of the American theater, of the film theater concept, because a pre-subscribed audience, of course, is the only way that you can get serious, important films made. It was the beginning of serious theater in the United States in the 20th century with the Theater Guild, and it could be the same in films. It certainly could work in this country, particularly through university towns, I should think, and through provincial towns, and also through very special, what are called specialized theaters, cinema theaters. Well, I should think university audiences, young audiences in general, people who know Brecht, people who are interested in new kinds of theater, people who are interested in influences, in general, the kind of audiences that would go to hear carefully selected music, that would go to operas, that would be interested in peripheral theater, and so on.
Do you think English audiences are going to get a chance to see a description?
Not on the basis of the highly enlightened people who control the industry in your country at the moment. Whether anybody will feel that there's enough money in it to justify their Rolls Royce, I don't know.
At present, I suppose, all this is of largely academic interest and will remain so unless the American Film Theatre can set up its cinema operations in this country. In America, in his first season, Mr. Landau claims to have had 500,000 subscribers, which is a staggering figure amounting to about 1 in every 400 people. I don't know whether the British are that culture hungry, or perhaps more to the point, that culture starved. Nor do I know, because I haven't seen any of them, how good the films are, although judging from the list of people involved, they ought at least to be pretty fair. Well, as yet, Mr. Landau hasn't been able to make a distribution deal in Britain, but he's still working at it, and he's obviously not a man to be easily discouraged. On the whole, and weighing up the evidence so far, I think we might wish him well. After all, Chekhov, Pinter, Osborne, O'Neill and Ionesco are, to put it mildly, in a different class to the writers of some of the rubbish that our indigenous film industry is turning out these days. However, we'll see what happens and let you know. Next week, new films including Elizabeth Taylor's Ash Wednesday, and I'll be talking to the aged but ageless Lillian Gish. Until then, good night. evening. As you may have gathered, our guest in the studio tonight is Lillian Gish, one of the first and certainly one of the greatest of the silent movie stars. When I say they don't make them like that anymore, I don't expect any arguments. But before Miss Gish joins me, let's consider the latest work of a more contemporary superstar, Miss Elizabeth Taylor, a lady who is also the subject of myth and legend, although not all of it is actually connected with her exploits on the screen. They don't make them like Miss Taylor anymore either. And even if her collection of husbands beats her collection of Oscars by a comfortable 5-2, she still turned in some pretty good performances on the set as well as at the altar. Well, now she can be seen in Ash Wednesday as a wife and mother who undergoes plastic surgery in order to save her marriage. She starts off purporting to be in her 50s and looking like Whistler's granny, less in need of plastic surgery than embalming fluid. However, the doctor does his grisly work and out she comes, looking like the comfortable, matronly Elizabeth Taylor we all know and love. But will it work? Will her unfaithful husband, mercifully for him only a brief appearance by Henry Fonda, fall in love with her all over again? His first reaction is not too encouraging. "Oh my God," he says, though this is perhaps less an expression of criticism than of his own inner turmoil. What finally happens I'll leave you to discover for yourselves. It's a very superficial picture which takes a potentially poignant situation and turns it into a bit of glossy frivol. The only performance of any note is by Keith Baxter as a fashion photographer also undergoing a facelift. Oh, and by the way, before the reunion with her husband, Miss Taylor has a little fling with youthful Helmut Berger. Here he is, chatting her up.
Why did you let me sit down at your table? To save me from another slap in the face?
Oh, I shouldn't think a slap here or there would make much difference to you. You were sizing up what your chances with me were, weren't you?
Let's say what my chances are. Well, what are my chances?
Well, I don't think I'll be the next woman that slaps you in the face, if that's what you want to know. What's your room number?
442. Easy number to remember.
Yes. An easy number. 442. Thank you for the company. Good night.
The Internecine Project stars James Coburn as a spy master in London, masquerading as a visiting American professor. One day along comes Keenan Wynn as a shady but powerful Washington lawyer to offer him a big job in the American government.
How would you like to be chairman of the President's Economic Advisory Committee? Huh? You know, our friends upstairs have put out a lot of effort to get you this job. It's what we've both been looking forward to for some time. You know, power is no damn good unless it comes from the top. Of course, there's a few loose ends that have to be tidied up. Skeletons and closets that have to be buried. By the way, this little network you put together here in Europe, is it big? How big is it?
No, it's small. 4 people.
Oh, well, then everything can be taken care of, right?
Is it really necessary?
Bob, I wouldn't want one guy walking around who knows things about you he's not supposed to know. Certainly not 4.
E.J. Now, I know just about everything there is to know about you. If I stood in your way, would you kill me?
I wouldn't think twice about it.
I always did say golf's a game that brings out the worst in people. Anyway, with never a pause for doubt or remorse, ambitious and evil Mr. Coburn concocts an ingenious, to say nothing of improbable, plan to persuade all 4 members of his spy network to kill each other. Director Ken Hughes keeps everything moving at a fairly crisp pace, and the sight of people like Ian Hendry, Michael Jaston and Harry Andrews pursuing each other with murderous intent is quite agreeable. But what makes the plot wholly preposterous is the fact that the 4 killings depend on the split-second timing of a series of telephone calls made from public phone booths. Well, this is taking place in London, may I remind you, and you and I know that a murderer trying to make a call from a public box in London will get a discontinued line, 6 wrong numbers, the engaged signal and a heavy breather, always assuming, of course, that he was lucky enough to find a phone that hadn't been vandalised before he got there. Any self-respecting assassin would have abandoned the entire project long before he got through to Mr. Coburn. Another big star currently on view is the prolific Clint Eastwood, an actor who seems almost as ubiquitous as Robert Redford. In Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, we find him first of all purporting, most unconvincingly I must say, to be a preacher in some hick town. But of course that's just a blind. He's really a bank robber, known as the Thunderbolt, who's hiding out from his fellow bank robbers because they suspect him unfairly of having double-crossed them and nicked all the loot for himself. Unmasked, he takes flight and fetches up with one Lightfoot, played by Jeff Bridges. And eventually, when the differences with his erstwhile colleagues have been resolved, they all decide to repeat the bank robbery which earned Mr. Eastwood his nickname. I enjoyed it all a great deal. It has good performances and a good script and good direction by Michael Cimino. The bank robbery is well planned, the ending is amoral but also slightly bitter, and the film does have the merit of producing the unexpected. This scene, for example, when George Kennedy, as the most irate of the original bank robbers, catches up with Thunderbolt and Lightfoot and starts to exact revenge.
Turn around.
The guy's in the car.
That's it, smartass. Red, Goody.
How's Dunlop? It's for us to know and you to find out.
Shut up, Goody.
What do you want, Red?
What do I want? You got balls, I'll say that for you, Johnny. I want your ass. That's what I want, my friend.
Hey, now flattery's not gonna get you guys anywhere.
Who's the comedian?
Name's Lightfoot.
Does he know everything?
No. Yeah.
Lightfoot.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I didn't hit him in the face. He'd be dead now.
You always did have a high opinion of yourself, Red.
What have you been preaching lately, Johnny?
Survival. You ready?
I've been counting the days.
That's for the kid. Now, do you want to talk or do you want to play games?
What do you want me to do, Red?
Shut your face.
I can't breathe. I got asthma.
The first non-Indian film of Messrs. Ivory and Merchant was called Savages and was an ironic allegory that explored the similarities between a tribe of primitive mud people and American society in the 1930s. It was generally received rather well by the critics, but I didn't like it a great deal. To tell you the truth, I found it extremely irritating, despite the fact that it contained some quite brilliant moments. I don't think I need Mr. Ivory to tell me that the veneer of civilization is very thin, and that underneath we're all pretty close to the savages. The news headlines point that out every day. What I'd like to know is what we ought to do about it, but alas, like everybody else, Mr. Ivory doesn't seem to have the answer. However, as I said, there are some very good moments in the picture, and this is one of them, an inconsequential but lively rendition at a dinner party of Steppin' on the Spaniel.
We're stepping on a spaniel, falling off a log, syncopated and you'll be putting on the dog. No difference if it's pedigreed or a mutt, I know. It doesn't matter when you're doing that strut, hi-ho. Stepping on a spaniel, it's on the up and up. Syncopated and you'll be pouncing on a plug. Close your eyes and give those guys a big smooch right now as you're jumping up and down and stepping on the pooch bow. Oh, da-da-da-da-da. stepping on a spaniel, falling off a log. Syncopated and you'll be putting on the dog. Dachshund setters know their betters and must submit. Every rover has come over to get with it. It's stepping on a spaniel, isn't it a lark? Syncopated and you'll be barking after dark. Close your eyes and give those guys a big smooch right now. As you're jumping up and down and stepping on a pooch bow wow.
Oh, I like that. At the moment, James Ivory and Ismail Merchant are in the process of making 2 new films. One of these, Autobiography of a Princess, stars James Mason and Madhur Jaffrey, and again is about India. It's part documentary, part fiction, and was made largely for showing on television in America. The theme is the now anachronistic princesses of India and the way their old affluent lifestyle is changing. Mason plays a writer who's researching a book on India's past, the days of the Raj, and here we see him talking about it with the princess.
Cyril Saab, what is your book about?
You ask me that every year and in your Christmas card.
Oh, I forget. I remember. It's about the life of some Englishman
Dennis Lever.
who lived in Assam for donkey's years.
35 years and not Assam, Orissa, princess. He made the most comprehensive record of local history, poetry and song ever assembled. An enormously valuable work. And at the same time, he was a first-class administrator who left his district one of the most prosperous and progressive in the country.
Oh, wonderful. Now, what about the other book? Our book. Well, if you don't write it, then who will? And all this material will just vanish into thin air. Such a loss to humanity. What's left of Royal India except what people like us remember? And we owe it to posterity to put it all down. It's a sacred debt.
James Ivory Ismail Merchant season at the Academy continues until October the 9th. Before we have a look at another and different kind of retrospective, it's rather pleasant to welcome a new cinema, The Gate. It's not entirely new because it used to be known as the Notting Hill Classic, a warm but shabby place that had the knack of presenting the films you wished you'd seen the first time round. Well, its successor, The Gate Cinema, opens on Thursday with Fear Eats the Soul, the German picture that won the International Jury Prize at Cannes this year. It's directed by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, and it tells the story, very movingly, of a love affair in Munich between a 60-year-old widow and a Moroccan immigrant worker, 20 years her junior. It's a study of loneliness and, most of all, of sheer mindless prejudice. The treatment of Moroccan workers in Germany appears to mirror the brave days of packy bashing in this country. I rather suspect that Herr Fassbinder has somewhat overdone the social ostracism that's visited upon a working-class German woman who so far forgets herself as to marry one of these alien creatures, but maybe not. Racial prejudice is not exactly unknown in Germany. In any event, it's a beautifully made film with 2 highly sensitive performances from Brigitte Mira and El Hadi Salem. Here's the scene when they meet in a bar where she's sheltering from a storm.
Wo kommen Sie denn her?
Kleine Stadt in Marokko, Tisnit.
Ach, Marokko.
Ja, viel schön, aber nix Arbeit.
Sie sprechen aber schon gut Deutsch. Sind Sie schon lange hier?
2 Jahre, immer viel arbeiten.
Ich habe auch viel Arbeit. Arbeit ist das halbe Leben.
Du nix Mann, verheiratet?
Mein Mann ist tot. Schon lange. Was arbeiten Sie denn?
Mit Autos, ganze Tag. Immer.
Mhm. Und abends gehen Sie dann hierher?
Ja. Hat schön Musik. Viele Kollegen Arabisch. Weiß nicht andere Platz. Deutsch mit Arabisch. Nicht gut.
Warum?
Weiß nicht. Deutsch mit Arabisch nicht gleicher Mensch.
Aber am Arbeitsplatz?
Nicht gleich. Deutsche Herr, Arabisch Hund.
Aber das...
Egal. Nix viel denken. Gut. Viel denken, viel weinen.
A moment ago I mentioned another retrospective that's taking place in London, and that's the D.W. Griffith season, which the Gate Cinema is presenting from September the 25th till November the 12th. It's a kind of early celebration of Griffith's centenary next year, and consists of 12 of his films, including such classics as Birth of a Nation, Intolerance, Judith of Bethulia, Broken Blossoms, The Struggle, and Abraham Lincoln. Wednesdays to Sundays inclusive, the performances will be at 11:15 p.m, but on Mondays and Tuesdays there'll be matinees at noon. Nice idea. However, mention of D.W. Griffith is a perfect cue to introduce the greatest of his stars, Miss Lillian Gish. It was Griffith who discovered her, and he and she together became internationally famous with Birth of a Nation. But before I talk to her, let's have a look at one of their most successful collaborations, Orphans of the Storm, and the moment during the French Revolution when Citizen Gish comes face to face with the fearful Robespierre. Miss Gish, welcome very much to the studio. When you see those films now, can you actually identify with that frail, wistful girl that you see on the screen?
No, not really. I never did. I always thought of myself as a painter. Instead of using oil or watercolor brushes, I painted with what I had, what God gave me, and on a screen in another way.
Well, you painted very successfully. That film, Orphans of the Storm, that was actually your last one with Griffith, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Now, what happened after that? Did you have a falling out with him?
Oh, no. No, Griffith never had a falling out, I think, with anyone. He let all his so-called children go, you know, when they had better offers, and he came to me and said, I can't pay you what you're worth. Now, it's time for you to go out and make some money for yourself. And I thought, well, he's tired of looking at my face, and I didn't blame him. I was tired of looking at it, too. But I've only, you know, a man can put whiskers on and change a mustache and hair. But a poor woman, she can't do anything like that. You just have that same face. And
well, yours has done you extremely well, I must say.
Yes, I'm grateful. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but you do. When you have to look at it every day, you think, oh, and you can have no vanity in films because you see everything that's wrong. And in the theater, you see people come back and say, oh, you're wonderful. And if you hear that long enough, you think, well, maybe you are.
Is that why, in the 30s, you more or less abandoned the films and went back to the theater?
No. I felt that films should marry music, the other universal language. And together, they could speak to the world without words. You know, Griffith did his first talking picture in 1921.
But at the time that you actually left Hollywood, the talkies were starting. They were doing what you wanted them to do.
Well, I had a contract. They said I was quite lucky because I'd been in the theater from the time I was 5 until I was 12, so I was used to using my voice and speaking lines. And they said I was quite lucky because I had another career ahead of me, and now they would make all my old pictures with words. What could be worse to look forward to? I thought, no, I'll go back to the theater where I came from. So I went back, and I've had 2 children since this.
Ah, yes, with a lovely picture
And my
book.
First one on Mr. Griffith. Neither one of them my idea, of course.
Oh, well, nevertheless, they both worked out extremely well. There is a story, I don't know whether you've ever corroborated it, that when you first were introduced to Griffith, he fired a pistol at you. Is that right?
Yes, he asked if we could act. And Dorothy pulled herself up and said, we are of the legitimate theater. He said, I don't mean reading words. I mean, can you act? We didn't know what he meant. And he said, come upstairs, I'll find out. So he called some of his actors, among them Lionel Barrymore, and called out a plot. And they all seemed to know what to do, and we tried to follow in and do what was expected, but apparently not entirely. And gradually he pulled out a gun, a little .22 revolver, and started chasing us around the room, shooting at the ceiling. We thought we were in a madhouse.
I bet you did.
You would. And finally, when it was over, he said, all right, you'll do. I've got a story, and I'll let you know.
You were, I suppose, closer to him than almost anybody else for a while, weren't you? I mean,
Well,
you were in all his great films like Birth of a Nation, Intolerance, Orphans of the Storm. What kind of a man was he like to work for?
Oh, everyone loved him. The crew loved him. The working people, the actors, the extras. For instance, when unions came in, each union, the electricians, the camera, orchestra, he had the golden card. He belonged to all the unions. Because whatever he asked them to do, however hard the work was, they knew he worked just that much harder because he was in the studio 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. He had no other life.
You must have been aware, I suppose, that you were working for somebody exceptional even then. What do you think was his greatest single contribution to the cinema?
Everything the cinema is.
Really, as much as that?
Well, the formula he used in telling a story on film is the one we use today. Even the talking picture, he did that in 21. And I was at the town hall in New York 2 years ago, and that day a voice telephoned me and said, you don't know me, but I was the electrician at the town hall when Mr. Griffith did Dream Street, his only talking picture. And did you know that there was a young man there? Of course, it was a very intricate system at that time, backstage, up in the projection room, all over the theater. He said, this young man, I thought, was working for Griffith, and I found gradually he wasn't. His name was Warner.
Good heavens.
And I said, was his name Jack? He said, I can't remember, but I think so.
Why did the film industry treat Griffith so badly? Because the last, 30-odd years of his life, he was out of work, in effect, and died an alcoholic, I imagine, and broke.
Then, I never knew him in the years I was with him to drink. Or maybe some nights at dinner he'd have one whiskey and soda, but never any more, or during the day he never drank.
So it was the treatment he got from Hollywood
Yes.
that led to the
Yes.
drink, not
but
the other
you
way
see, he was a creator. He couldn't take a script and do what someone else had written and he was told to do. All the years I worked for him, I never saw a script or anything in writing. Nothing. It was all in his head or the heads of the other directors. We rehearsed in a hall, and that's how we filled in our stories, found our characters, the walks, the way we would sit down, stand up, our gestures.
And yes, he didn't really outlast the silent days, did he? I mean, he did make a few talking pictures, but he's not really remembered for those.
No, no, and yet there was always some innovation. I'm told time has been kind to the struggle, I believe his last one. I haven't seen it recently. And they reissued America. And when he showed me that picture, I left him and I went away and made a film called The White Sister and took it out to show him. And he showed me his America. And when it was over, it wasn't very good. It was one long subtitle and then a little action. Now they have spoken the subtitles, and then the action comes in, and it's ever so much better. It's been improved. That's the only film of his that I know of that.
That's an encouraging thought that they've been able to do that. Ms. Gish, I'm sorry we don't have enough time to go on. I'd love to talk longer. I do wish you luck with that book. It's a lovely book. Beautiful, beautiful photographs and beautifully written. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for letting me come.
There's a malicious rumour going about that Lillian Gish is 78. I don't believe a word of it.
It's not true.
It isn't true.
I'm not that old.
I
no.
didn't think it could be.
No, no.
I shan't ask
I'm
you
as
how
old
you
as
are.
I look.
Well, goodness me, that's a child yet.
Oh!
Anyway,
No.
she couldn't be 78 unless she'd taken the same treatment
No,
as Elizabeth Taylor did in Ash Wednesday.
I certainly am not.
And I don't believe that she did that either. Anyway, that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Next week, I'll be looking at Federico Fellini's new picture, Amarcord, and Michael Dean will be talking to Fellini himself. See you then, I hope. Good night.
Oh, we're stepping on a spaniel, falling off a log. Syncopated and you'll be putting on the dog. Doghound setters know their betters and must submit. Every rover has come over to get with it. Stepping on a spaniel, isn't it a lark? Syncopated and you'll be barking after dark. Close your eyes and give those guys a big smooch right now as you're jumping up and down and stepping on a pooch bow wow.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
Grand Hotel, room 112. What happened?
Somebody just dropped in.
Good evening. Michael Caine at his most laconic. I must admit to an affection and partiality for Mr. Caine. Both in private life and on the screen he has the endearing gift of self-mockery, and never was such a quality quite so vital to a film as in his latest picture, The Marseille Contract, in which he co-stars with Anthony Quinn and James Mason. This is a thriller, but it's more than that. It's a compendium of every screen cliché you ever saw in a thriller, from The Italian Job, which starred Caine himself, and in which motor vehicles bumped about in the most unlikely places, to The French Connection, in which sinister goings-on went on in railway stations, and even to shades of Steve McQueen and his motorbikes, The Great Escape.
Well, I'm playing a policeman in this picture, and I don't know what you mean by which side of the law does he stand on, because obviously he stands on the side of the law. What he does with that law is something else. It's a man who takes the law unto himself, which I think is a theme of the picture, actually. The question in the picture is, how far do you rely on the law as it exists when you know that sometimes the law may not deal out justice and you take justice into your own hands?
If you want someone hit, give me my price and I'll do it.
The place is Marseille.
And who?
The man's name is Brizard, Jacques Brizard.
That will make it $50,000, payable in advance.
For me, it's something I've always wanted to play because I've always played rather tough characters. I've played gangsters, I've played people who killed people before, but I've never played an actual professional killer, which is, by the very nature of it, someone who just does a job without emotion. I read in the paper the other day that I have a very cold look. A lady was looking for some people to pose nude in a magazine in America. She said, I'd never ask Michael Caine because his eyes are too cold ever for him to be in the nude. And I thought, well, that's a marvelous look for a hired killer, because I always imagine them to be cold. The main difficulty is to try and make them human beings, which of course they probably are.
This is the story about the kind of crime scene with which we are fairly familiar. That's to say, it's about drug traffic internationally, and it concerns, it involves, therefore, the big man behind the crime, various forms of crime that go on, and is seemingly a perfectly respectable citizen, as many master criminals are, or seem to be. And no matter what area of crime, whether it's political crime or drug trafficking or other kinds of crime, very often you'll find that the leaders are men of great personal charm. I have always been very much beware of charming people since early on in my career. I found that the people who always did me the most damage and were the most dangerous were the most charming. And therefore, I play this part with all the charm stops at work, pulled out, you might say.
Needless to say, Mr. Mason projects charm as though he'd invented the stuff, while equally needless to say, Mr. Quinn, who's made a speciality of overacting, overacts. Maureen Kerwin provides the obligatory touch of sex, while Michael Caine, despite being obviously too cold-eyed to pose in the nude, lends the picture a touch of distinction with his portrait of a hard-boiled and sybaritic gun for hire. In addition, there are one or two scenes which remind us that Robert Parrish, the director, is after all a man with a fair bit of form behind him. This one, for instance, in which drunken Mr. Quinn, anxious to get to grips with nasty Mr. Mason, interrupts his boss in the middle of a poker game.
3.
1.
All right, Steve. Here takes 3.
Fred, I want to talk to you.
Steve, not in the middle of a poker game.
It'll cost you 100.
Fred, I want to talk to you now. It's really
I'll call. Look, will you knock it off? We're trying to play cards here. Are you in or out? I've already called.
We raise you $250.
We raised you $250. There's 100 and $250.
Fred, I hate my desk.
Steve, I'll move you in a new desk. Now, Jimmy, you gonna call or not?
I'm out.
Are we playing cards or are we moving furniture? Go on, take the pot you win.
Hey, we bluffed them, huh? What's the hell of a
Okay,
pot?
my deal. Give me the card.
No, hey, sit this one out, will you? Look, Fred, I really got to talk to you.
Steve, can't we do this at the office tomorrow
Fred,
morning?
This is important. I wouldn't be...
Why don't you guys go in the bedroom? You be nice and quiet in there.
It's a good idea. Come on, Fred.
Okay, Jimmy, you take the deal. Deal me out for a couple of hands. Doesn't like his desk. Steve, what's all this about?
Fred, I really hate my desk.
Look, Steve, I don't like my desk either. But I'm gonna go play poker.
Wait, Fred. Just... Fred, wait. I want to ask you this. Let me go after Jack Brizard, huh?
You know I can't do that, Steve.
I wonder if you recognise the cigar-chewing boss there, none other than Pierre Salinger, one-time press officer to the late President Kennedy. A trend worth watching, this habit of politicians going into films, because John Lindsay, ex-mayor of New York, has recently made his acting debut in an Otto Preminger film. I suppose it makes a welcome relief from actors like Shirley Temple and Ronald Reagan going into politics. Or perhaps it merely underlines one's deep suspicion that all politicians are actors anyway. However, back to the Marseille contract and this scene in which Michael Caine has been invited to dinner by charming Mr. Mason, the man he's come to kill.
So, that's why this year's charity ball should be called Survival 74.
Bravo, Mr. Brizard. You will have my wholehearted support and a suitable donation.
Ah.
Are you interested in survival, Mr. Davos?
I never think of anything else, Countess.
And what aspect of the environmental problem concerns you most?
Overpopulation.
Did you know, Mr. Davos, that in the time of Jesus Christ there were 100 million people in the world? In the 17th century there were 500 million.
People will always make love. What is a solution?
I have a solution.
Not birth control or abortion, I trust.
Is that what you had in mind?
No, nothing like that.
Then what?
I think that some people should be killed.
Yes. But which ones?
The bad ones.
But who would be the judge of that?
Why, me, of course, Countess.
Otherwise they might choose you.
There's another thriller around at the moment, a comedy thriller called Bankshot. and this appears to have had scorn poured upon it from almost every critic in the land. Well, not every critic. Mr. Tom Hutchinson of the Sunday Telegraph quite enjoyed it, and this reveals him to be a most perceptive fellow, because so did I. I think, to be honest, it may be because I also have a long-standing partiality for that accomplished actor George C. Scott, and to prove how indiscriminately affectionate I am, I rapidly acquired yet another partiality for his co-star, Joanna Cassidy, a lady with the most raucous and uninhibited giggle I've ever heard on screen. The plot, I have to confess, is pretty ropey. Mr. Scott plays a mastermind criminal who sprung from jail to help a bunch of crooks with a collective IQ of about 10 to rob a bank, or more accurately, to steal a bank. And here he is with Miss Cassidy, completing his getaway from prison in an aeroplane.
What are you staring at?
Does it fit?
This stuff's really expensive. Saks Fifth Avenue, silk underwear. Who really paid for all this?
Carp's jet set backer. Very rich person. You'd like a drink, wouldn't you? Bourbon, isn't it? Carp says you like bourbon.
Yeah, bourbon.
Carp says you're a genius.
Something funny?
I don't know. Would you like something with your drink?
What do you have?
Coffee, tea, or me? Isn't that what a stewardess would say? Well?
You trying to do a number on me?
Oh, no, nothing like that. It's just, well, I just thought you have been in prison.
Yeah, well, first, I don't mix a job with jazz. Second, I'm full of sodium nitrate. You know what that is? Saltpeter. You know why they feed you saltpeter in prison? That's why they feed you saltpeter.
Poor Mr. Scott. At the National Film Theatre, from now until the end of October, there's a season of films by Raoul Walsh, one of Hollywood's veteran band of accomplished craftsmen. This season transferred from the Edinburgh Film Festival, where, as a sort of accompaniment to the pictures, somebody produced this book of critical essays. And I thought that just in case you had difficulty in comprehending the films of Raoul Walsh, I'd read you bits from the book and so make everything clear. So let's start with Objective Burma, which for a time was banned in Britain because it showed Errol Flynn, in an American uniform, apparently mopping up the entire Japanese army all by himself. But what you may not have realised about this deeply meaningful piece of cinematic art was, and I quote, that Walsh is uninterested in developmental characterisation outside the central characters. Characterisation is the result of dramatic contraction, the linear core of the narrative augmenting its dialectical rhythm. It's in this way one may view the increasingly committed journalist in Objective Burma.
11 okay, 10 okay, 9 okay, 8 okay, 3 okay, 6 okay, 5 okay, 4 okay, 3 okay,
2 okay. I hope.
Stand in the door. Jump or we'll miss the clearing.
You got all that, did you, about the dialectical rhythm? Right, well, let's move on to Band of Angels, which is about racial tension and strife in the Deep South at the time of the American Civil War. No, what am I talking about? I didn't really mean that at all. What I meant to say, of course, if you'll bear with me, was that the trajectory of a film like Band of Angels towards the gradual acceptance of an indelible identity invested with tension by a struggle against the atavism of the past. The central characters no longer occupy the centre of the frame, like Flynn supervising the parachute drop in Objective Burma. If they do, they hang suspended between alternatives, like the young Amantha in the opening scene of Band of Angels, framed between the old Negro Shad and the fat cook discussing her lineage.
I catched you giving my bears away, and you put her up to them tricks. You no good, Shaddy.
That baby gal has got to eat big to grow big like me.
Mm-hmm. She growing up, blooming out pretty all over. Before you know it, someday she gonna be owning Starwood.
Huh? On Starwood?
Yes, her, and that's enough from you.
But she couldn't.
Shut your mouth.
No, I want to hear about it. Shad?
If Massa Aaron finds out...
Massa Aaron? Him? Them mucks ain't nothing. Pull off the fancy clothes and they ain't nothing different. And Mandy, what's she? She ain't nothing. Ain't no better than nothing.
You get up and get yourself up out of my kitchen. Out of my kitchen right now, before I hit you upside your head.
No better than nothing? What did he mean?
He just crazy, that's all.
I'll ask Father.
Manty!
Well, once she'd sorted out her lineage, she grew up to be Yvonne DiCarlo, a half-caste, and got herself involved with Clark Gable and Sidney Poitier. Now then, some people thought that Pursued, which starred Robert Mitchum and Teresa Wright, was merely a Western, although possibly the first psychological Western. But of course it's not as simple as that. To understand the film, according to this invaluable book of essays, you really need this communicational model. And to understand the communicational model, it's necessary for me to tell you that, strictly speaking, the laws of psychoanalysis require the introduction of a barred J, because J2 is no more than the signifier corresponding to I. However, this would needlessly complicate the schematic representation of the process, and it therefore has been omitted. Well, of course it has. Silly of me to bring it up in the first place.
I wanted to lie, but I didn't. If I had, it would have been to keep you here, not Adam.
You felt that way, too? Same way I felt.
I was supposed to be your sister. That's how it's been ever since we were kids. Only I stopped being your sister, and you've never been my brother. I had to go on every day pretending, watching you all day, letting you touch me. At night, gone in my room, lying there, thinking about you. I wish I had lied. I wish I'd cheated about the toss and kept you here.
Wait for me.
Oh, you know I will.
I'll leave him at the A-Fly livery stable. You can pick him up in the morning.
So long. Give them Spaniards heck for me.
I'll do that.
Now, how about The Naked and the Dead? War story, right? Based on Norman Mailer's bestseller, starring Aldo Ray, Cliff Robertson and Raymond Massey. The whole crux of this, you'll appreciate, is that the dualism of Croft and Hearn in The Naked and the Dead illustrates the dilemma of action and its multiple contexts. The linear brutality of Croft, the extremities of his existential vision vis-à-vis the mountain, contrasts with this deliberately facile montage of Hearn's love affairs or the spatial vacuum of General Cummings' tent.
The General wants you to report over at his tent, sir.
My master's voice.
Run to Papa.
Yes, sir.
Robert, how are you?
Fine, sir.
Have a cup of coffee.
Thank you. Thanks.
You know, Robert, I can't help feeling that you've been avoiding me.
Not intentionally, sir.
A commander's life can be a lonely one. After all, there are not many people I can talk to. Even though we disagree, I enjoy our conversation.
Well, thank you, sir.
I thought we might finish that game of chess.
All right.
All right, put that table out under the light. You're still annoyed with me about the meat, aren't you?
No, sir.
Oh, you've been thinking about my logic. You agree with me?
Well, I'll tell you, General, maybe everything you say makes sense. Maybe in wartime, your logic is right. But when you talk about instilling fear and breaking men down, I'll never agree with you.
Well, we'll see. Now, I think it was my move with the wife. Check. Chess is inexhaustible. What a concentration of life it really is.
I don't think there's anything remotely like it in life, General.
Well, we seem to be off again. Just what do you think warfare is, essentially?
I don't think it's chess. You're dealing with men, not pawns. You're not unlike my father, General. To him, all his factory workers aren't humans. They're some sort of lower animal, closer to machines.
I wish we had more men like your father.
General, when you take a company of men, check, how do you know what's going on in their minds? How do you calculate whether it's better some of them get killed and the others get home sooner, or whether they all stay here but go to pot wondering if their wives are cheating on them? How do you tote something like that up? What do you use? Calculus, geometry? Do you draw graphs?
The answer is I don't concern myself with that.
They think they've got Cody Jarrett. They haven't got Cody Jarrett. You hear? They haven't got him. And I want to show you, they haven't got him. Come on. Come with me.
Finally, and again, of course, I quote, "The structurally perfect example is White Heat, in which the sympathy of the audience is perfectly balanced between Jarrett, the demented gangster, and the undercover policeman who betrays him, thus obscuring the under-elaborated mechanisms of morality through a careful adjustment of the emotional perspective."
Don't shoot! It's me, Riley! I'm coming out! Don't shoot!
You might as well come down, Jarrett. There's no one left but you.
Come and get me!
Get the gun, Hank. What's holding him up?
The only decent advice I can offer you is to forget all this preposterous rubbish and simply go and see the films, because some of them are really rather good. Well, in the next few weeks, London will see the opening of The Night Porter, a film that marks Dirk Bogarde's comeback. You may think comeback is an odd word to use, because you may not even be aware that he'd been away. But after Death in Venice in 1971, he decided to go into at least semi-retirement, and it was only the prospect of making The Night Porter with Italian director Liliana Cavani that persuaded him to change his mind. It's quite obviously a film about which he feels very strongly indeed, as he suggested when I spoke to him about it last year at his home near Cannes. Can you tell me something about The Night Porter?
I'd really rather not, insofar as I'm not evading anything, but it's such a terribly complex story. It's a love story. But it's a very complex story, and also I confess that I've written most of it myself with Cavani, because we took a lot of stuff out and we condensed a lot of stuff. So I don't honestly know what the hell the thing's about.
Well, since then, The Night Porter's had a rather spectacular career. I've not seen it yet, so I can pass no judgment. But it's an obviously controversial story about the relationship between a young Jewish girl, Charlotte Rampling, and the SS officer, played by Bogart, who seduces her in a Nazi concentration camp. It takes up this relationship again 12 years after the war, when the girl, or young woman as she has become, books into a hotel in Vienna and discovers that Bogart is the night porter there. The film proved so disturbing when it opened in Italy that it was seized briefly by the police, who tried to have it banned. But in this they failed, because the assistant district attorney in Milan ruled that far from being obscene, it was in fact a work of art. And finally, The Night Porter played to critical acclaim and great commercial success in both Italy and France. This is what Dirk Bogarde had to say about it when we talked to him again in France this summer.
The film is now open, as you know, to tremendous success in France and Belgium and in Italy indeed. And it's easy for me to see it now. It is, paradoxically, because it doesn't appear to be there, what I always hoped it would be, which is a love story of the most incredible kind, under situations or circumstances of such appalling horror that you cannot imagine they existed.
Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do.
If I were rich, I'd hire you to do everything for me. Would you?
No. The story happens to be based on a fact which we made into a story. And it simply is the proof of Goethe's saying that the innocent also are guilty, and the innocent also, the guilty also becomes the victim of his own misdeeds. And really, in essence, that's what the story is about. Basically, for an ordinary audience, it won't be a family audience, it's not that kind of a movie, but for an ordinary audience, it's a love story under extraordinary circumstances, proving that even if, as one American newspaper said today, even if you're sick and mad, if you want to say it that way, you can still love. And it is about love. It's a story of love. That's all.
Sicherheit! Sicherheit!
I have a reason for working at night. It's the light. I have a sense of shame in the light.
I believe the cinema should disturb you, should disturb an audience, not just pleasure it, not amuse it, simply. I've done all that. Now I want to make pictures that disturb you and make you talk. People that come out of The Night Porter, for example, don't speak to each other for 5 or 6 hours. At the end of the film, nobody gets out of their seat. They're just in a state of extraordinary shock. One reason I think that The Night Porter may possibly be a difficult film for an English audience to take is that England was never, fortunately, by the grace of God, never occupied by another country. We never suffered an occupation. France has bitterly, as you well know, and is still bleeding from that 4 years. So indeed did Italy. So that makes a lot of difference to the youth of both these countries. They're very much more adult, in a different sense. And I prefer, therefore, to work with Cavani, to work with Bertolucci, if he was working with me, with Louis Malle, with Truffaut, with Godard. There's a kind of experiment going. There's still excitement. You could never make The Night Porter in England.
Wenn ich mir was wünschen dürfte, käme ich in Verlegenheit.
Tell me what you talked about.
What you said to each other!
I've now become a cult figure in my new country, France. They never saw the films before I worked with Losi, for example. Never saw my popular movies. I'm only known since The Servant and the Visconti films and the Jack Clayton films and the Schlesinger film, Darling. It's very strange to suddenly find that you have become a cult at the age of 50, but you're still, fortunately, I hope, alive. I thought cults only happened to the dead. Maybe I'm dead and I don't know.
Dirk Bogarde, very much alive, and a few glimpses of The Night Porter, which we'll be reviewing when it opens in London. And now some sad news. Film 74 is taking a break next week, but lest you're about to hurl yourselves into paroxysms of despair, let me assure you that we'll be back in a fortnight's time with a roundup of the current releases. So until then, good night.
Lebendig liebe ich zu leben. Ich kann nur sagen, ich liebe zu gefallen. Wenn auch nicht immer liebe ich zu lieben. Ich weiß nicht, was ich will und dort erwarte.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Good evening, and straight to the bottom of the class, anyone who failed to identify Fred Astaire in the 1935 musical Top Hat. Seeing it for the first time in the early 50s, wrote the distinguished dance critic Alain Croquet, was like seeing a film made in ancient Egypt. She was underlining the fact that it was a particularly stylized period piece, already an antique the day it left the studio. But what a style, what a period. We'll be seeing more of it later on. We'll also be looking at Stardust, which is a fairly disenchanted 1970s film about the pop scene of the 1960s, and I'll be talking to Ray Connolly, who wrote the screenplay. We'll be sampling more than 100 years of American history with the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, a remarkable movie about a remarkable lady who lived there long. And we'll be turning the pages of some vintage film scores, which, among other amazing feats, set Errol Flynn to music. First, though, the Odessa File. Frederick Forsyth wrote the bestseller from which it's extracted, and John Voight plays the hero, a freelance journalist who's presented with a diary kept by an elderly Jew who survives the horrors of a wartime concentration camp, only to take his own life when no one will believe his story that the camp commandant, an SS butcher named Rushman, is alive and well in Hamburg, 1963. Voight starts to investigate and winds up at an army reunion where the dear old pals sound ominously like dear old Nazis.
Tonight's here together here. But when are we apart? For us, nothing changes. Germany believes she doesn't need us now. But one day, she'll know that she does. We'll be as mighty again as we ever were. It'll take time. But the ideals will be the same. And the drums beat, and the bands play, and our flags wave again, and our whole nation will be united once more. Then we'll march together to the ends of the earth. One people, one Germany, one leader.
I don't think you'll have too much difficulty in guessing the rest. Roachman is alive, and what's more, he's protected by the Odessa, a secret organization designed to install SS diehards at the helm of the new Germany. Frederick Forsyth swears it's all true. The Odessa really existed, he says, and in 1963 it was plotting with Egypt's General Nasser to build rockets armed with bubonic plague and strontium-90 to shower down on Israel. According to the film, the man who stopped it happening was the doleful John Voight, whose only joy, script-wise, is to shack up with a rather prim stripper played by Mary Tam, but whose talents as a crusading reporter you have to take solely on trust. Judging by what I saw, I think he'd have problems digging out the guest list for the Bowls Club picnic. Through no resourcefulness of his own, he encounters the Israeli intelligence, who are also on the trail of the Odessa.
For the last time, what do you know about the Odessa?
Only just what Simon Wiesenthal told me.
So why, after you spoke with Wiesenthal, did you contact Ferdinand Schultz?
Dr. Schmidt, he represented himself to me as Dr. Schmidt, and I didn't contact him. He contacted me!
David, give us 15 minutes, and we'll get the truth.
I'm telling you the truth. I've told you the truth.
You say he threatened you.
Yes.
Why?
I don't know why.
Because of your interest in this diary.
Yes, yes, yes!
Unaccountably, the Israeli intelligence think he's the man for the job, and with their help, Voight prepares to infiltrate the Odessa. I suppose if you like the book, you may also enjoy the film. I found it clumsy and predictable, and at 2 hours, 9 minutes, painfully long. Ronald Neame directed it, and if that sounds like an accusation, I do apologize. It's just the way it came out. If you saw the film Sounder, you'll have already encountered a beautiful and quite brilliant actress named Cicely Tyson. She plays the lead, indeed the name part, in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, which is no more and no less than the life story of a black woman born a slave in Louisiana who felt the first stirrings of freedom one day in 1862 when Northern troops driving south in the Civil War stopped by her master's plantation.
You're nothing but a child yourself. How old are you right now?
I don't know, Master.
Ticey, I'm not a master. I'm a plain, old, ordinary soldier. My name's Corporal Lewis Brown. Now, can you say corporal?
No, Master.
Bet you can. Go on, try.
I can't say that.
Can you say Lewis?
Yes, Master.
All right, well, you call me Lewis. And I'm going to call you something besides Ticey. Ticey's a slave name. And back in Ohio, there's lots of pretty names for a girl like you.
What names you got?
Oh, Eloise. Sophie, Marguerite, Jane.
I like Jane.
Okay, you take it. Now, from now on, your name is Jane. Not Ticey anymore. Jane. When you get older, you change it to anything you want, but until then, your name is Jane.
For Jane, freedom's a long time coming. Poverty drives her back to plantation work, where she's still a slave in all but name. She falls in love with a young horsebreaker named Joe Pittman, and they plan to leave the fields and start a new life together. But there are problems. The plantation owner claims to have paid protection money to the Ku Klux Klan, and now he demands a return of his premium.
Well? Here's the money, Colonel. I'll count it out so you're sure it's all there.
It's all there.
You're a smart one, ain't you? Well, I got news. Time lap come to $5 more.
You didn't say nothing about that.
But you ain't got no more.
I got legal rights, my interests.
What are you doing, Jane? That's your wedding ring.
That's our freedom.
What's so attractive about the film is its modesty. It was made for American television, but it's showing here on the big screen. Although the theme is tremendous, it's treated both by the writer, Tracy Keenan Wynn, and the director, John Corty, with that rare kind of sense and discretion that allows events to speak passionately for themselves. And what's so remarkable about Cicely Tyson's performance is that although she's increasingly burdened with makeup as she piles on the years, one's never distracted by the miracles of nose putty and spirit gum. The real woman shines through. By the end of the film, she's 110 and in danger of becoming installed as a sort of female Uncle Tom by the white community, which sees her as a safe symbol of a vanished past. But the murder of a civil rights worker in the nearby town shows the paternalists that Miss Jane Pittman is her own woman. She's finally free.
You're staying right here in the quarters today. Been some trouble in Bayonne. Don't want nobody else to get hurt.
Who got hurt? Did my Jimmy get hurt?
They shot him.
Is he dead?
Oh!
Who shot him?
Nobody knows.
Somebody knows.
Well, I don't know nothing about it. Y'all go on back now.
I'm going to Bayonne.
What you think you're going to find there except trouble, Miss Jane? You're too old for that.
Jimmy.
Didn't you just hear me say he'd been shot?
He ain't dead, no nothing. Only a piece of him dead. The rest of him is waiting there for us in Bayonne. And I'm going.
Miss Jane, you've been on my place long as I can remember. You've been part of my family. You raised me, and both my boys. But I'm telling you, you ain't going to Bayonne today.
Is you gonna tell me now that I have to leave your place?
Those folks ain't your problem.
Mr. Robert, the other day, they throwed a girl in jail for trying to drink from the fountain. Today, they killed my Jimmy, and I say, I'm going.
Now to Cicely Tyson herself, the star of the film, although star seems far too glittery a word for such a doggedly homespun performance. Jane Pittman won 2 Emmys for the Best Film and Best Actress in last year's American TV Awards. Recently, she talked to Don Bennett about the film.
How do you think it will look in 10 years' time as a repeat on television, the style of it?
Oh, I think it will stand up over the years, I mean in centuries, because of the simplicity of it. You see, I think when you go to extremes, it tends to date you. I think when you do things simply, it becomes classical. And I think that's a situation with Jane Pittman and the way it's been shot. I think specifically they might have had that in mind. One of the critics said, well, he said this specifically of my performance, that it should be put in a vault for actors and actresses down through the ages to view. And I think because it is so simple, it will hold up forever.
Would you have liked to have seen more actual documentary material, like television shots of Martin Luther King, as part of the production?
No. Because I think everyone in this day and time knows about the civil rights movement, knows about the part that Martin Luther King played in it. And I don't think that it was necessary to show that at all, because we're all aware of that. You see, I think just suggesting it brought it all to mind. As a matter of fact, there were many people who were involved in the civil rights movement, who were very moved by it, having been involved. Just to be reminded of those moments was an emotional experience for them. I remember one particular, at the first screening of it in Los Angeles, one particular man who just went to pieces. I mean, he was just bawling. And unashamedly, he just put his head down on the lady who was sitting next to him and just bawled. And it turned out that he had gone through the experience of having a gun pointed at his head, and it just brought it all back to him. So I think it would have been too much.
Just how fast is the black cinema developing in America?
Well, I think the blaxploitative films are on the wane, and I'm very pleased to say that. I think it's very slow. I mean, Sounder was done 2 years ago, and Sounder was, for me, the tide turner, if you understand what I mean. Since then, there have been a number of films, not enough, but it's happening. It's going to take a while, but it'll happen. And I don't advocate that we completely discard fantasy and escape type films. I think we need them as much as anyone else. But I think if you're going to have fantasy, you've got to have reality. If you're going to have the negative, you've got to have the positive, so that the scale is balanced. And I think we're well on the way to balancing the scale now.
How do you remember the 1960s? Was it a golden decade, the time of flower power, the age of the Beatles, when even middle-aged hearts were young and gay? Nostalgia earns dividends, but Stardust, a film about those dear dead days, casts a very cold eye on what we may recall so fondly. It's the sequel to That'll Be the Day, and it continues the story of pop star Jim McClane, played by David Essex, who learns here at his mother's funeral what it's like to be loved almost to death by his fans.
Bloody frightening, isn't it?
Increasingly, the music business and the money men who run it insulate McClane from the real world. Reality, in fact, is a word which is baked out of his vocabulary in the hectic world of one-night stands.
Happy now?
Eh?
Is he not beautiful?
What do you mean? What are you talking about?
You know what I mean. You can tell me. Come on.
Don't be so stupid.
With David Essex